I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I am joined by many of my friends here today. Gordon Demowski, Patrick McCrae, Alan Gallant, and Daniel Culver Killenberg. This is going to be really fun. We're here to review House of Dark Shadows. Now, we've covered House of Dark Shadows on this channel before, but it's always fun to go back and reminisce. I have an opening question for everybody here. If you know, we all know that through the series there was opening narration. Here's the first Dark Shadows movie ever. No opening narration. What did you guys think of that, Daniel?
Honestly, I didn't really think about it, but I would say it was okay because, you know, a lot of movies don't really have that anyway.
Yeah. Gordon?
Well, considering that at the time, most people had already seen Dark Shadows, and technically this is not a direct to the movie screen spinoff, I don't think it really matters that much.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Alan?
The rumor is that they couldn't get Orson Welles to do the narration, so they decided to can it. It wouldn't be necessary in this film format to have that, I don't think.
Oh my God, Patrick.
I can't imagine that this movie would have, really anything in it that would disorient or disappoint or let down audience members who came for a Dark Shadows movie. So actually, I'm kidding. That's a lot of what it does. Yes. And so why not ditch the opening narration while you're at it? And basically, it's a sneak preview of coming attractions of, if you love Dark Shadows, you're only kind of going to get sort of some of what you want, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we know Dark Shadows becomes popular because of Barnabas. I mean, this is, in a lot of ways, though this is not made by Hammer, in every way it's a Hammer film.
Yes, very much so.
So, I mean, this is made at the time that Hammer is still around and going. But the one thing this does, well, there's many things this does, and if you've ever read Patrick McCrae's book, The Dark Shadows Daybook, you know that this was being filmed while the show was still going on. So this was being filmed while they were doing the 1970 parallel time arc. So now Daniel has not made it there yet. He's at 1897. But we know that this movie stars Jonathan Fripp, Kathleen Lee Scott, Dawn Briscoe is in this movie, Nancy Barrett's in this movie, Kathleen Lee Scott's in this movie, John Carlin. John Carlin is in this movie. Lewis Edmonds is in this movie. Thayer David's in this movie. I'm trying to think of everybody. Alan Humphrey.
Barbara Jason.
Yeah, it's a who's who of Dark Shadows alum that's in this movie because, hey, they're bringing the cast from the series to the movie, and why not, right? So, what were you guys' thoughts on that they brought the cast from the series to the movie? Gordon, I'll let you go first.
Well, I think first it's a way to kind of let people know that, like, hey, this is Dark Shadows, even though it's kind of sort of not Dark Shadows. Secondly, it was probably much cheaper because nobody was a film star. They probably just worked for scale. But I think it also gives it a little bit more of a, it's kind of feels like another parallel time version of a previous storyline. So I think it helps it helps the audience see it. I can see someone going in thinking, oh yeah, I know that guy, or I know that guy, that person, and then leaving thinking, that wasn't what I remember from the show. So I think it gives them that kind of comfort level.
Yeah, the Curtis vision of the film as opposed to the television series, I think, really called out for the original cast to be used for at least some thread of familiarity there.
Yeah. Daniel, what did you think?
I actually thought it was a pretty good idea, because, like, it makes you know that it's a Dark Shadows movie because, you actually see the same actors from the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause, like if they had gotten, like, say, Avery Schreiber as Barnabas, they would have been taking a huge risk. But if you know that Jonathan Fritz playing Barnabas, you're safe.
Yeah, that's true. Now, one thing that could make this confusing is, as you guys know, it's not canon, so some people might be confused by that, but I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's true. Patrick?
Yeah, well, I think it begs the question, as opposed to what? Given as was pointed out, there were ether scale and so on. I mean, who else were they going to get? Especially when this is so personality driven that you put Jonathan Fritz on the front of a teen magazine, people are going to go crazy. And I think the roles and the cast members at this point are pretty indistinguishable. I mean, it
No.
Bond movie would come out without Sean Connery. And so, considering that we were just 3 years into Jonathan Fritz, that would have been like making Goldfinger with somebody else. And so, I mean, they had to use the cast members, and as the only logical thing. Now, if MGM had thrown a pile of money at them and said, we want Keir Dulley's brand of entertainment, well, then Keir Dulley's brand of entertainment we would have had. But that kind of raw electric charisma, the electric dynamite of Keir Dulley, is something that we were denied.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's a really great thing that it's MGM who's doing House of Dark Shadows. So that's my question to you, Patrick. Was there any other studio considered other than MGM, or no?
No.
I don't really know. I don't think so. I mean, I would love to see all the MGM stars at the time with their arms interlinked, with Jonathan Fritz with his cane in the middle of them. That's a picture I desperately want. I mean, they were largely in the distribution business with this.
Yeah, and I wonder. I think around this time, like, MGM might have been one of those studios that was in financial trouble, so they maybe saw this less as, okay, we have this grand artistic vision for Dark Shadows, and more like, oh, hey, it's got a name, we'll throw some money at it, it'll earn us some money.
Yeah, and they didn't. I don't think they had to throw a huge amount of money for a large studio at it either. I think that the figure $700,000 or somewhere around there.
And they made it look like 700.
70. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they made a lot of money off of, got a lot of return off of. That's why they ended up doing the second film. So.
Can I tell you guys something? When I went back and rewatched this again today, because I was watching on DVD, I noticed many key things. But as much as I love, Thayer David in this movie, because he's sort of playing, he's the one who you would think is going to go up against Barnabas heavily. But the one thing I like, the person I feel has a coming out party in a lot of ways in this movie, it's not just Kathleen Lee Scott and Jonathan Fritz, it's John Carlin. He does a really great job in this film. I know he does other movies after this, and I know we've talked before about how Hollywood did not really go after the Dark Shadow stars the way they should have. But if you watch this movie, I can't, John Carlin should have. I'm not saying nobody else should have been, but John Carlin should have been a household name in Hollywood.
Well, he eventually became a household name. He won the Emmy in 1984 for Cagney and Lacey. Yeah. And the thing about actors, and I say this as someone who knows more actors but has never been an actor, it's not always you go from TV show to automatic stardom. with casting, you're working at it. You are rehearsing, you are auditioning, you are refining your craft. So it's easy to say, well, why didn't anyone pick up any of these Dark Shadows and make them stars?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it may have just been opportunities. I think Carlin was probably more of because he did stuff both with and outside of Dan Curtis for a few years
Did a
until he
ton
got
of
famous.
television and guest starring and that sort of thing. So he made a decent living at it.
Catherine Lee Scott did a lot of intermittent stuff until she starred in her 1980s masterpiece Big Seamus, Little Seamus. So Jewel, don't assume that sometimes it takes work. It takes a lot of hard work.
Well, I think also too it takes a bit of luck. For example, when me and Butch were talking about westerns, when we were doing the Dollar trilogy, the first by all accounts, when you do the research, the first dollar trilogy script, Fistful of Dollars, was not a great written script. It's why a lot of people turned it down before they ultimately went to Clint Eastwood. Like, for example, Henry Fonda turned it down because he said the script was bad. Charles Bronson, who they approached, said the script was bad. So, and when Eastwood, when it came to Eastwood, he even said the script is bad. So they rewrote the damn thing.
Which is one of the big differences between those films and House of Dark Shadows. Anyway, continue.
Right. I think too it does boil down to like hard work and dedication and talent, but it also boils down to just luck too. That if the script had probably been, if that script for that movie had been written well for the first time, you may have never heard of Clint Eastwood, at least from a movie standpoint at that time. But because the script is bad and the two people they wanted said no, the script's too bad, they go to somebody who's a television star at the time in Rawhide and Clint Eastwood, and they go and he says, well, yeah, the script's bad, and then they decide to rewrite it. There's actually a video where they have somebody who doesn't even look like Clint Eastwood, but it's supposed to be his character, and there's this judge or something, or this marshal sheriff, who tells him to go to the town where his character ends up going to anyway. It was added on in because it was a part of the original script apparently, but it's so stupid. And I don't count it anyway. It's not in the movie anyway. But back to House of Dark Shadows, I do think for actors, yeah, I agree with you. It's about hard work and dedication, but it's also about getting that lucky break too. I mean, this movie, I know some people do like it, some people don't. And I understand that, but I think one thing it does really well, like if you had never seen the show, it really establishes the actors as how big they really can be, because they all rise to the occasion in this movie. They all do a phenomenal job. Like if we weren't Dark Shadows fans, if we had never heard of the show Dark Shadows, and you were just watching this movie on blind faith, because two people do watch movies on blind faith a lot of times when they've never heard of a franchise, you look at the actors and go, my God, are they all really, really, really fucking talented? It's.
I feel like I would be disloyal to the uniform if I said less than that. Um, I'm not entirely sure, as good as they are, that the script really gives them opportunities to, for me at least, live up to the vision you described. I think they are really glass ceilinged by the opportunities that the script provides. The script provides some very memorable moments here and there. Some great stuff with Louis Edmonds and David Hennessy. I think some good stuff for Jonathan Frid's okay. Grayson Hall, can always bring it. I wish that the script had challenged them a little more. I wish it had given them a little bit more to do. and I think for me to see performances of the caliber that you're saying, I would have to see them given the opportunities to really match that. I guess.
Well, I hear what you're saying. The thing too is for this movie, because we're all familiar with the series, though they're playing characters with the same namesake, they're not exactly playing the same character they are.
Sure.
They're playing a slightly different version of what they were playing.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Given that these were the same writers and, same, directing force, not the same directors, but, and the same kind of characters and storylines. I mean, how fair is that to give audiences almost sort of kind of the characters, and yet not? I mean, it's a good workaround in terms of a rationalization for us. But at the same time, should we have to have a rationalization? Or shouldn't we be able to go to this film made by all the same people and see? I mean, let's compare it to Star Trek 09, made by J.J. Abrams. I mean, totally different writers, totally different lineage, totally different actors, and yet every character is given a moment that makes you go, "Hey, boy, that's Sulu in a way I never even knew." But man, that really nails it. And I kind of wish we had gotten that, and I attribute it just to exhaustion on the part of the writers. And maybe they took it for granted that we would just kind of accept it. But I don't think we should have to go to, well, these aren't exactly the same characters. Yeah, they're not. But if they're not exactly the same characters and it's not exactly Dark Shadows, then charge me half.
Yeah,
because I'm paying for all of Dark Shadows.
Yeah, and I also wonder too with the script. Part of it might have been because it's Sam Hall and Gordon Russell running this, and at some point they were working on this script while they were working on the show.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah, and you also have this film, when I watched it this morning, I had two big thoughts about it. First is that it's kind of Dan Curtis's. I think it probably best reflects Dan Curtis's original idea for the Barnabas arc, which is, vampire. Barnabas goes around, threatens people. Maybe not as many, not as many biting of the Collins family, and then he's offed. And this is also a really good test run for the 1992 revision, because there's like the scene with David doing if I catch this one, Carolyn isn't dead, and
it's the thing about it that is interesting to me in a sort of odd way is the fact that this movie is the first in a long line of reboots, rehash, and it's rehash in Grand Guignol style. But you're right. Then this is extracted from in the 90s series. It's true. And it's all part of a pattern of reboot that Dan Curtis seemed to be. If I'm going to do this again, I'm going to tell the love story beyond time, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that.
Well, I mean, he rips himself off again in Dracula.
Yes.
In the Palance Dracula.
Yeah.
I'll answer your question here in 1 second, Patrick. I want to get Daniel's thoughts on what you just said. Go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry.
What was the question again?
The question was I'm sorry. How did you word that, Patrick?
I don't remember. How did I word what? What did I say? I take no culpability, Your Honor.
Well,
that's fine.
It's okay. Well, I think what Patrick was getting at was how the characters had a glass ceiling in this. And
the script.
The script.
Basically, Joel was talking about how good the performances were, and they are, but that they're not. I don't think they're quite as good as they could have been because the script doesn't really ask a lot of them, and it doesn't provide a lot of the opportunities that I think would really that we see on the series here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not easy to do. Art isn't easy.
That's true.
And then
I did like seeing. Oh, go ahead.
The type of storytelling is so different in films, and this is Dan Curtis's first foray into that, so we have to take that into consideration as well.
Sure.
I did like seeing Carolyn as a vampire.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
it's got visually so many great punches,
Yeah.
and that's one of them.
Here's how I'll answer your question too, Patrick. That when I first watched this movie, every time I go back and watch it, I can't rewatch it like I did for the first time. But the one thing I'm always blown away with this movie is the actors knew the series was still going on. But I think there's, and some of this is going to be opinion because I have no fact to support it. I think at this point in time, in my opinion, Dan Curtis was wanting to take at least Jonathan Frid and make Barnabas a movie franchise. That, in a lot of the way, in a sense, I don't know if he wanted to necessarily make Dark Shadows a bigger franchise. He wanted to make the character Barnabas.
I wish
don't
he had
know.
worked harder at
Again,
that.
that's just my opinion.
I
But
wish.
Yeah,
for the movie standpoint, what I love most is because we were so used to Roger from the beginning being this dad who didn't give a shit. He didn't want anything to do with the townspeople. He wanted to bolt the doors, if you will, to a degree in the series. Here's this guy who's all about having a party, welcoming the guest. He actually hugs David in this movie.
And something to keep in mind, Joel, which I don't think this was Dan Curtis's grand. I mean, it would be nice if it were kind of a Barnabas starring, let's make Barnabas the lead. I think this is more, and I know I'm going to be like I hate to be extremely bitter and cynical, even though I usually am. I think this was just a cash in.
Yeah.
It was okay. Dan Curtis knew he had something on his hands. His original plan for this film was to edit pieces of the Barnabas storyline into a movie, the actual series, but he realized, he can't do that. And so this is like the episode 212, 211 to 361. It's the greatest hits.
I think ultimately Dan Curtis was looking past Dark Shadows by this point, actually starting to, because this film was an entree into the world of filmmaking in general for him. Mm-hmm. I think more than it is franchising Dark Shadows.
Yeah, and I think too, it's when you consider that for a lot of the cast, except for maybe Joan Bennett, this was their first go around into movie making, where Frid is a lot more confident, even though he's much more evil, because he doesn't have to worry about remembering his lines live on camera. He can,
scene by scene, section.
Curtis will like cut, give Frid his script, shut up, Jonathan, or I'll beat you with my golf club.
Learn these 3 lines now, and because that's basically all you'd have to do when you're. I think it was Joan Bennett, Thayer David, and Grayson Hall had certainly done films before.
Yeah.
And Louis Edmonds had done at least one. He did Come Spy with Me the year before the show. So
something we get in this movie too, with the difference of the characters is Carolyn, who never wanted to leave Collinwood because of her mother, she is going to leave Collinwood in this movie. She's going to go to England because she asked Barnabas, "You have to give me some people to look up," which I like because the characters, they look refreshed. The actors do too, the actresses, but they not only feel different, they just act so much differently than what they did in the series, and that's something I always appreciate this movie for. If you're gonna have that separation, then God damn it, man, have it. And that's what I like this movie for.
Well, Jewel, movie money is better than TV money. And movie money is especially better than soap opera money.
Minimums usually are. But the other thing that's going on here, Jewel, and this is from a practical point of view, as somebody who's been an actor for 40 years, is that a lot of these actors are going back and forth. Not the like Frid's not going back and forth. We know that, but several of the other actors are going back and forth between New York and upstate New York to do the show. Maybe they're off the show for 4 or 5 days, and then they're going back and they're doing that, and then they're coming back to Lyndhurst to shoot a couple more days scenes, and they're going back again. So there's sort of a schizophrenia about this, and also the writers are left with being burnt out from deadlining the film, and then trying to piece together this other plot that accommodates all of this movement that goes on for 6 weeks or 6 or 7 weeks. So that's a sort of a dynamic that's going on at this time, practical dynamic.
So you guys mentioned about the greatest hits. Let's get into some similarities between the movie and those greatest hits, like 212, episode 211, where John Carlin's character Willie Loomis finds the secret entrance. But now the biggest difference there is in the series, it's completely by accident. He's trying to open up the grave of Naomi Collins. He doesn't realize that the hook on the lion's mouth is going to pull. And it does, and it reveals a secret passage. Here in this movie, he reads, the dove watches the lion, or the lion watches the dove, I think it says. And Catherine Lee Scott's Becky Evans is looking for David, and she asks Willie for help. He doesn't want to help. He wants to find these jewels. He even tells her. She goes, "You're drunk." Roger comes in. He goes, "Find my son." He goes, you find your own son. And he fires Willie on the spot. And Willie goes into the cemetery where they film in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Shout out to Mark Gilman. He told me that years ago. So what do you guys think of the difference between the way Willie Loomis not just was in the series, but how he found Barnabas's coffin accidentally in the series and found it more? He still somewhat, I guess, finds it accidentally in this.
But he doesn't expect to find a coffin. He expects to find
things in the room. Right. He doesn't. Great point. He doesn't expect to find a coffin. He expects to find all these jewels. But he more knows about or has a suspicion, I would say, about the lion's mouth being able to be pulled down in the movie more so than he did in the series. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
I think that part of the reason why they had things that were similar but different is that, keep in mind, at the time, the people who are seeing this movie might have already seen that storyline, so it's not quite fresh in their mind. So by doing the greatest hits, doing the tomb, then the first person moved through the door, introducing Barnabas, it's a way to kind of go, yeah, I kind of remember that. It also serves as nice little story beats, especially when the movie turns and becomes much more. It takes on an attitude that we're not the series. So I don't think this is a deliberate, like, okay, we're going to do the scene exactly. And also logistically, if they're filming upstate, they're not going to build a whole new mausoleum just to make it like the show.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we've seen the show, and on the show, their job was to take 3 pounds of flour and fill a 30-pound sack.
Yes.
Here, it's exactly the opposite of all of the challenges they've had. Now they've got to cram as much into as short a space as possible.
And they also have to do it. They're still doing it on a relatively low budget for a film, so that's why they have all these wonderful locations in upstate New York that they utilize, which Curtis already knew about from when he was scoping out the series initially. That's how they found the old house, which was on the Lyndhurst estate. It burned down by this time, but it was there. And Lyndhurst itself would have been, kind of right there. So,
Daniel, what did you think, man?
You guys make some good points, but honestly, I prefer how it was in the show. But I understand where you guys are coming from. There's reasons they couldn't make it like it was in the show.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't prefer it the way it was in the show. I just understand why they made the choices they made.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was just saying, that I personally prefer the way it was in the show. I know some people might like the movie way better. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
Everybody
I
has the
like-
right to be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Plus,
I know.
not you.
McKinley loves the movie better because it was the first experience that he had with Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I prefer OG Dark Shadows. In black and white, where they actually had to they actually had to figure out, okay, how do we make a mausoleum in a really small room that's
Yeah.
probably poorly ventilated.
When this podcast ends, Gordon Demowski is gonna put on his leather jacket, wear his hat backwards, and produce the Dark Shadows rap album.
Let's do it.
Funny you should
Joel,
mention that.
I can get you the studio time.
Oh my god. I like the difference here because, as we all know, Willie Loomis in the series was a thief, and he was brought to town by Jason McGuire. Here, no Jason McGuire, and we have a Willie Loomis who actually is a handyman who is already working for the Collins family. Which I really enjoyed. The differences are really cool between the series and the movie. We can spot some of the similarities they're trying to take, right, to a degree from the series, because they're not hard to spot, but they're also taking that sort of different strokes approach to a degree where, okay, yes, this is Willie Loomis, but this isn't quite the Willie Loomis you knew. This isn't, or we all knew, this isn't quite that Willie Loomis who was so wild and cagey and ready to throw down in a knife fight with Burke Devlin and swing a knife at Burke Devlin. No, this isn't that Willie Loomis. Yeah, he's
Matured,
a bit wild.
mellowed Willie Loomis.
True.
Willie
Grand
Loomis,
Marnier.
the doer's profile.
Mellowed on Old Crow, or maybe Old Granddad.
Yeah, Willie Loomis who wears cardigans and dungarees and smokes a pipe.
Yeah, we actually, well, the fun thing is in the movie, we actually see Willie get caned.
Well, that's the thing about the movie. They could do things they couldn't do on the television series, and Curtis really wanted to do that, and he wanted to. It's kind of a combination of his love of Universal horror films when he was a child, and the blood and guts of Hammer. The only thing they don't have is, like Peter Cushing and maybe Ingrid Pitt thrown in. That's just...
Yeah. Now,
Ingrid Pitt would have been good.
Yeah. A really cool scene that we get is, now we never, in the series, when Barnabas first makes his appearance, we don't see Barnabas walk to the Great House. Here in the movie, we do, because like you guys said, it's bigger. They have a lot more budget. They're on
And they also have
They can go outside.
Right. They can go outside. They're on location. Because by the time they do Barnabas in the show, as our mutual friend Gordon Demowski has pointed out, they're not on location. They go away from the atmospheric on location the way they were doing in the beginning. Here they can go outside. We see the beautiful wide open space as Fritz Barnabas is walking to the house, and he rings the
John
door.
Ford Desert Vistas.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Only it's the Hudson
When
River
he's
Valley.
put on a horse.
Or you're right, or John Wayne when John Wayne.
The map of the world with the little dotted line that follows his journey.
Right.
Yes.
Instead of a plane, it's a cane going across the screen.
That's right.
What did you guys think of that nice wide open shot? Whoever wants.
It's good. It has a mythic resonance.
It does, and it is cinematic, which take advantage of it. You got it, use it.
I agree with you guys.
Yeah. Great shot. Fred's character rings the doorbell. He says, "I'm Barnabas Collins, a cousin from England." He goes in, plays.
Order. How does he know what a doorbell is?
Well,
You would think he would just naturally go for the knockers.
Well, remember, the biggest difference here too is there's a scene in The Blue Whale where you see John Collins, Willie Loomis sitting with Barnabas. They don't show
Barnabas, when you come up to a door, you got to press the
You gotta
button. I'm
press the
telling
button.
you.
right.
That's
right?
the whole conversation.
I
is.
don't
It should
remember
have
that
been.
scene in the movie. Is that in one of the deleted scenes, Joel?
What
No,
amateur writers they had, right? They watched that scene.
there's a scene in the Blue Whale where they're mentioning another girl got attacked, and this time a girl died.
Yeah, again, I
And-
don't remember that scene in the movie, Jewel. I watched the movie this morning.
And-
there is no that scene in the movie.
And you see Carolyn's character, and you see Todd Blake, who's Donald Brewster's character.
That.
And that one. And she spots Willie Loomis, and she sees that he's with somebody, but we don't see Jonathan Fritz's face. We only see the cane and the onyx ring. And she goes, "Who's that with him?" And she tries to sort of look around him, but he's blocking her point of view. And she's like, "You didn't pick up your pay." Well, I'll be back. I'll be by to pick it up later.
There was a cut part of that where Bill Malloy comes up and threatens Barnabas at the table and says, "I know who you are. I know you're gonna turn me in." And you see Barnabas he just under the table, he undoes his holster, and Malloy makes one threat too many, and Barnabas pulls the trigger and he falls off Widow's Hill. Barnabas shot first.
See, I don't buy that Willie ever told him about door buzzers ahead of time.
Beautiful stuff.
He was too busy telling him about toothpaste and toilet paper. There was so much other stuff going on.
And modern technology,
Right.
Telephones. Yeah, electric lights.
Pencil sharpeners.
Well, modern technology would probably include the doorbell. He could say, "Well, nobody really knocks on a door anymore. They ring a doorbell."
But they do knock.
That's right.
Anyway,
choice.
Semantics.
It's not like they thought when using the corn cob.
Drew, you want another difference between this movie and the TV show is?
Go ahead.
In the movie, it's only 90 minutes long.
Yes.
The TV show is about 600 some hours long.
It only seemed like 90.
What would have been a great Andy Kaufman gag is if he had managed to get 16 millimeter transfer, whatever, of the TV show, and he sat audiences down and he just played them continuously with no closing credits, just to see how long they would sit in the theater.
Wow, that's a lot for $3. Wow.
I've been here 8 days. It's not over yet.
That's right.
I think Maggie's going to get kidnapped soon. I don't know.
Well,
I'm existing only on popcorn and jujubes. I'm hallucinating.
Well, Barnabas's first victim in this movie is a young girl named Daphne who works for the Collins family. She's leaving the house, and she's got the long walk to her car, and she hears the dogs howling. She hears these strange sounds, and she decides to bolt to her car. And she gets in the driver's seat. She locks it. She goes to lock the passenger door. It's jerked open, and Barnabas has got her by the neck, strangling her. We don't see the bite happen, which I like the cut away that we get the entrance of Jeff Clark, our hero of this goddamn movie.
Yes. It's true. Dan Curtis really did like Roger Davis a whole lot.
I like Roger Davis. Yeah.
Roger Davis, good actor. Daniel, what did you think about that, man?
Yeah, I agree with you. I like how they did that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Go ahead, Gordon. Sorry.
No, you go along. I was just paying attention.
Oh, okay. Well, after that young girl gets choked out like a pro wrestler, we obviously get Jeff Clark, and he sees Daphne and he stops the car. It's dark. It's a lot more darker than what it just previously was. And he gets up to her, "Daphne!" He screams at her. He's like, "Daphne!" He sees these two puncture marks on her neck. And this is where the next scene we're introduced to one doctor, Julia Hoffman, who still is a doctor. She's not quite the Julia Hoffman we love and know from the series, because though she's familiar with the legend of the vampire, she might not necessarily believe in them the way one Professor Timothy Stokes does in this movie. He's more Van Helsing in this movie than anything else.
Yeah, Julia exists in reality.
Yeah.
And Stokes is welcome to join them. As it turns out, though, he's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're somewhat borrowing from the series. she's taking a sabbatical from her work to do a research into the Collins family history, legitimately this time. With the move, that's her sort of cover in the series that she took a sabbatical from her work because nobody knew she was a doctor in the series till post 1795, other than Barnabas and Carolyn and Willie. And so, what did you guys think of the difference between Dr. Julie Hoffman in the movie and Dr. Julie Hoffman in the series?
There's a lot of practical reasons for the differences too, and one of them is that the writers have to come up with ways, and we discussed this before. You got to get it down to a 90-minute format, and we're incorporating a lot of these characters from the show and a lot of the sort of initial plot lines into this, so we have to do it quickly. So we can't go through the whole thing of Willie coming to town. That's going to take 10 minutes out of the whole film. What we're going to do is we're going to have him already be there, and then boom, he can get into this scene where he's half in the bag and he's obsessed with Jules and he goes after it, that kind of thing. It just happens.
Oh,
it's already there.
I thought you meant obsessed with Jules.
Jules, Jewels.
Really, for a moment,
Jules.
I must find Mr. Sains. Point me to Pennsylvania. I've got to...
By the way, the Hudson River Valley looks nothing like the coast of Maine at Hancock County. Take my word for it. I worked down there in a theater for like 17 years. So
yeah, and because this is a short movie and the audience would already kind of know these characters, because this is not I don't think this is a movie for people new to Dark Shadows. You don't need to start throwing in random, this isn't a Marvel movie. You don't need to throw in random bits of backstory. Even when yeah, I mean, even at one point, Barnabas says, "When this curse was laid upon me," he doesn't say by the witch Angelique because I cheated on Josette with her boat. It's get to the point, move forward. This is a cash-in movie. It's a good cash-in movie, but it's like the Batman movie of the Adam West Batman movie of the 1960s. It's a good movie, but it's meant to cash in on something that's popular.
I would have enjoyed a post-credit sequence where Nick Fury comes to recruit Jeff Clark.
Played by Adam West.
There you go.
Oh, all right, you MFer. Since you know how to kill vampires, we need you now.
Yeah. Daniel, what did you think of that, man?
Were you asking about the? Were you still asking about
Dr. Julie Hoffman? Yeah.
I thought she was. I like this version of her as well. But again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I prefer the show version.
Yeah, everybody does. We all prefer the show version. The lovely, lovely Grayson Hall. So, guys, I do enjoy Roger Davis in this movie. I think he does a good job, though. Dan Curtis is sort of going for, I guess you could say, the reluctant hero in a sense, or the least likely hero. And
that would have been Willie.
Would have been Willie, and they sort of gave him the moment where he saves them by taking the arrow and everything. But yeah,
the biggest bolt I have ever seen from a crossbow on that big around.
It's medieval. I mean, it's just huge.
Would it have been too obvious to make Thayer David more of the hero of this movie, even though he's sort of Van Helsing?
He's the beefcake, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. He's the erotic sort of pleasure of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the smoke show. I mean, he's the give him like a open Kiana shirt with an astrocyte medallion, preferably Scorpio.
If anything, I think this movie suffers. Well, there we go. I think this movie suffers from trying to include too much. At a certain point, the writers, hyper experience with soap operas is to their detriment, because as any Chat GPT will tell you, really reduce the number of characters, and you're able to pay a little more attention to each one. Yeah. And so it's like really you just throw a dart and any of these characters could have been the hero. Because it feels sort of arbitrary rather than one of them having an arc similar to Barnabas's, but on the opposite trajectory. And from that point of view, it really would have been Willie.
Yeah.
Who would have taken care of business, and just his conscience couldn't take Maggie, being the sacrifice, and that he was responsible for it. And I almost kind of wonder if Sam and Gordon brought that up to Dan, and Dan said, "No, we got to have a matinee idol." It's like, well, the women really like John Carlin. You clean him up just a little bit, and there's I mean, shit, we just saw Easy Rider do really well.
Yeah.
That kind of Easy Rider-esque treatment of Willie Loomis, I think would have really sold. And I think John Carlin, as sort of hottie lead, could have done it.
Yeah, I wonder if at some point when they were when Sam and Gordon were charged with writing this film, Curtis gave them a whole bunch of scripts and say, take the best stuff from those and adapt it. Versus, okay, here's the story. Here's the story of what happened, because this does feel very much like, kind of a fan written Cliff Notes version of the initial Barnabas arc.
Yeah, I'm sure that Dan Curtis had a great deal to do with the tone and tenure of the script. I mean, he had during the show, the 24-hour writers' meetings involved Dan Curtis with his cigarette holder and his golf clubs or whatever, and they would just go and go and go and be burned out, and then have to get up the next day and start treatments for various scripts. And so he was very influential that way. I don't foresee that, or I don't imagine that he would have been less influential with this.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit amphetamines.
That's right. And they didn't actually. I think they were probably jonesing on no-dos.
Bond put it in champagne. He did.
One of them had a friend with a Coke connection. You never know.
Yeah, it's late 60s, early 70s.
Old nose candy, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
The devil's dandruff.
I think Dan Curtis was using it to brush his teeth, keep them nice.
Now, okay. Now that's I'm
sorry, but it is anyway. It is all Curtis's vision, and to the point where he had really no camera experience with directing except what Layla Swift had done in the studio. So Arthur Ornitz, who was his director of photography, pulling what was left of his hair out half the time, because he was telling him, you can't do it that way. Because practically you couldn't. I mean, there's a difference between Orson Welles saying, let's do it, and, and actually technically not being able to do it. And in that case,
listen to Greg Toland.
Yes. I mean, if he told him it was absolutely impossible, but he also would say, let's give it the old try if he thought it was. So, and I think Ornitz was sort of tasked with teaching Dan Curtis about camera angles and lenses and all that sort of thing. And I mean, he learned it fairly well. But I think Curtis's greatest directorial feat was being able to delegate. Once he got to the point of doing Winds of War, he had to delegate a lot of directorial stuff so that he, wasn't breathing down people's neck all the time.
Daniel, what did you think about Thayer David's Professor Stokes in this movie and Roger Davis's Jeff Clark?
I think they did a pretty good job. And actually, one thing I wanted to point out, did you notice that they called they called Timothy Stokes Elliot?
They had started that in the television series too at that time.
Oh, I never noticed that.
Became T. Elliot Stokes, I think is what he ended up becoming. So it's Timothy Elliot Stokes, but they would call him Elliot. I'm not sure why that happened.
That's pretty weird. Make a fuss when he's got to work with Barnabas.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But yeah, I think that these versions.
What's the answer, Jewel?
What's that?
Who's the cat who won't make a fuss when he has to work with Barnabas? What's the answer?
Stokes. Can you dig it?
Right.
Shut
They
your
say
mouth.
They say
Yeah.
this cat Stokes is a bad mother.
Shut your mouth.
I'm talking about Stokes.
Well, then I can dig it.
We can dig it up.
Stokes is a complicated man, and no one understands him but his Willie.
No one understands him, but he will take cheese with cherry. So- oh my God.
Cutting
You
it all
also
night long.
mercilessly criticize your very nice colonial furniture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you borrow in the series, when you borrow something from him, he's not just going to hand it over.
I see Broyhill. Well,
That's,
color me impressed.
They were drunk at the time.
that's right. Speaking of, Gordon brought this up a bit earlier. So they don't say the name Angelique. Barnabas says the word. They put this curse on me. Who the hell is they?
No. He said when this curse was put on me,
Wh-
not
what-
when they put this curse on me.
No, he said when they. When they
No,
put
I think
this
he
curse,
said when this.
when they put this curse on me. Go ahead.
When this curse was put on me.
At any rate,
The movie this
again,
morning,
not
Julie.
complicating the story with
He
even
was
more
polyamorous.
stuff. Yeah, that's
It
right.
was a whole coven of Angelique
That's right.
that he screwed over.
All these voodoo priestesses over there in Martinique, and they have their own social club.
That's one thing that's interesting because if you think about it, they could have like made a sequel and said, changed the storyline and said like someone else cursed him.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the planned sequel was called Curse of Dark Shadows,
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
aka the Jules Sane story.
No. Of course, the villain is James Aubrey.
As Caligula again.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. One of the things I sort of wish they would have done. I'm not trying to play Monday morning. I'm not trying to play Monday morning quarterback, I swear. I do wish, because they do take Willie Loomis and they do have him tell Catherine Lee Scott's Maggie Evans, stay away from Barnabas. And he does say that the reason he gets beat like with the cane really, really hard is because he does tell Stokes. I wish we would have had a scene where you see the side of John Carlin's face and you see the cane marks, where you see the black and blue eye, and he would have been sitting there. He's a vampire, and you don't know who he's talking to. Then you get a wide shot of in the church, and he's telling Reverend Trask. He's confessing.
Well, there's no Reverend Trask in this movie.
Well, there's Trask, but he's a priest in this movie.
Yeah, but is he named Trask? I mean, I'm not being wacky. I don't know if he's ever named.
The actor shows up in the funeral scene, but he's not. Yeah, he's not named as anybody.
Right. But whoever Jerry Lacey is playing, I would have loved to seen a scene where the one hero you never thought about was the priest, because it'd have been something so different.
You never suspect the priest.
That's right.
No, you don't.
I think he should have played Bogart and gone after him like that.
Yeah.
That's a movie.
Play it again, Sam Hall.
Play it again, Sam Hall. That's brilliant.
Oh my God. That line is never other than Casablanca. Play it. What he says. Oh my God. Speaking of scores, the lovely Robert Cobert. What a composer. How underrated is he, guys?
No, he was well compensated. I do know that. He ended up a wealthy man. So I don't know. He was certainly not underrated within his community.
If Dan Curtis had any idea, he would have written lyrics for that theme song.
Yeah.
These are dark. There's some real dark shadows. Yeah. They're so dark. They're really dark. Because that's the sort of thing Roddenberry did to Alexander Courage. He slipped in lyrics at the last minute. So every time the Star Trek theme was played, he got half of Alexander's money.
He did. Perfect.
Gene.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Cutthroat son of a gun. The thing, speaking of the music in this, The music to me, it jars a little bit. I love the music, but it's really tracked loud. It's extremely loud. And I think that's a criticism that I have of it. It just jars too much. It's volume. That's all it is, really. But I understand. Again, there's that hammer thing going on.
Yeah.
Barnabas is sneaking up on someone the music's playing. He turns to the camera and says, "Bob, keep it down."
That's right.
He's gonna tip him off.
Yeah.
But it was kind of jarring, and especially in certain peak scenes, it just gets really loud. It's like, oh, they've maxed this out for drive-in screens, almost kind of thing. It has a feel to it.
And Jewel, you missed one important person who makes his acting debut in this film. George DiCenzo.
George DiCenzo.
Yeah.
And he goes on to have a really good career as an actor.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I bet you have no idea who I'm talking about. Do you, Jewel?
No.
In the
Go
movie.
ahead.
Okay. You know the guy who's guarding Maggie before old Barnabas comes in?
Yeah.
That's
Uniformed
George
cop. Yeah. Uniformed police officer.
Uniform.
He was the
And
he
the reason
was
he went
the,
to acting was
he was the assistant producer, and he ended up doing a couple of sort of body double stuff on Dark Shadows later in 1840. But he is probably best known for playing Vincent Bugliosi in Helter Skelter, the made-for-TV version of the Manson trial, murders and trial.
and the reason he went into acting, Jewel, was that he saw that like all the Dark Shadows actors got out at 5, and he had to hang around with Dan Curtis after hours. He's like, you know what? I envy those actors, guys. I want to be one of them.
I just imagine George on his back, with his lips up like this, and a golf ball there, and Dan's going, "Hold still. I just got to work off this stress a little more." And
You really think about today's episode.
He sees Phil Panic just waltzing out. I picked the wrong career.
Oh my God, Daniel, what did you think of the score, man?
I thought it was pretty good. I know that's a basic answer, but yeah, I just thought it was good.
It is workmanlike. It's serviceable.
And, I mean, it was a re-record too, so I mean, there's a lot of kind of cool depth to it. I'll give it that. I mean, if you put them side by side with the television ones, there's a real depth to it. That's.
I just imagine on the second movie, Curtis going, "Bob, you cost me a mint that last time. This time you get a harmonica and that's it."
That's right. Or reusing everything else.
One of my favorite things most about this movie is the first person perspectives we consistently get in this movie. We get it from Jonathan Fritz Barnabas. It makes you feel like you're Barnabas. And you also get the victim side of this, where he comes at Carolyn and they use a first person sort of look where you see Fritz's face, the fangs. It makes you feel like you're Carolyn being bit. And I especially love the staking of Carolyn, because it makes you feel like you're trapped like a rat. You're Carolyn.
And that's maybe one of the most effective just pieces of cinema in the movie.
Yes, some of the stuff that he ended up using later in the Night Stalker films and in some other films, along with his signature shot, which is the child's eye view shot, shooting up towards the characters. That's a criticism for sure. But the only thing I didn't like about the bite shot was the fact that you could see Fred's nose hairs. I mean, it was just, it's just.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Oh yeah, it was like every pore on his face. I tried checking that out on a large screen. It's even more lurid. Yeah, it's supposed to be lurid. It's supposed to be. So.
All right. I think too, we've talked about bigger budget, and you get to do what you want with the camera. Hey, let's get as many cool angles as possible. And when I watched this movie for the first time, and still watching it today, I'm still shocked that we got first person view. I was not expecting that in this movie. And we get it at pretty consistent basis. And we don't just get it from the vampire, we get it from the victim angle. And that's something, when you think about it, John Carpenter in just in a few years in Halloween in 1978, he's going to give us a first-person view of the killer walking into the house and stabbing his sister to death. It's really, really cool that Curtis does this in this movie. And it's what I love most, because it's really art formish and great.
It's use of what's called, or what used to be called, the Handycam, which is like an incredibly heavy version of the Steadicam. And it wasn't very steady because you had to sling it on your shoulder, and it was probably weighed 50 pounds. And it, there are pictures of it. I mean, you see Curtis throwing it on for a publicity shot or whatever at some point. But that's when you get that sort of jostling, like you say, the point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a way to differentiate it from the show, because with the show, whenever Barnabas bit someone, it was Barnabas, then cut to victim, Fritz putting his teeth in, and then cut to Fred going.
Yeah.
But like with the first person shot of him entering Collinwood, the audience knows Fred is in this, because at this point he's the only Barnabas. So you don't want to give the game away too soon. You want to make it powerful. What do? First person in. The attacks are a little bit more visceral because, you don't have to worry about cutting between. You just camera, have Fred come in with his nose hairs and his teeth.
Absolutely.
And I hear Dick Smith actually hand inserted those nose hairs. I don't know if that's true.
I wouldn't doubt it. He was quite compulsive about detail. There's no doubt about that. I mean, look at the thousands of liver spots he put on that bald head. So,
God. Like a trill.
And the Larry Fine hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hair. I'm sorry, it looks better on TV with the toupee.
It does.
The white toupee.
So
I really,
I think that looks much more cool. It's just cooler.
Another actor in this movie is the late Dennis Patrick, who plays Sheriff George Patterson. I love how he plays the sheriff in this. What did you guys think?
It's the gloves. And hanging under the belt and just kind of looking around. It's all, the posturing and everything.
He's no Dana Elcar though.
No, it's true, but at least he got the cash out for that one. So
yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I'm sure Dana was busy, so it's like, hey, Dennis, you want some cigarette money? Sure, I'll stop by for a day.
At least he didn't hold it.
I'll even bring my wife in. She can be Mrs. Johnson.
Yeah. And yes, I guess he didn't hold it against him. I don't know. I think by this point on the show, Dennis might have been off, but maybe not.
No,
but
Dennis was off. He came back on to Paul Stoddard, and then
right. That's right. Okay, yeah, but it was kind of happening at the same time as this movie was being shot. Right. I was trying to figure that out.
Don't forget that lovely graveyard sequence in the series.
Oh yes. When he couldn't be there, and that's why they hired Roger Davis to come back, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think he wasn't available to come on and do the whole revenge thing with Jeff. That's what I've heard anyway. It may or may not be true, but and so that's why they had Roger come back with this strange noose around his neck.
Guys, what's you guys' favorite scene in this movie and your least favorite scene?
My favorite scene is the when David comes in and he's seen Carolyn and the interplay with him and Roger. That just really that is a very as a fan of the show and as a fan of those characters, that's a very nourishing moment that I don't think the show really ever gave us as resonantly.
Right.
Alan?
Well, that would be definitely up there because again, it's also dialogic. It's which makes it similar to the show in some ways. It's rather than cinematic with all the close-ups and the attacks and all that stuff that you have in a modern horror film. I really like the whole deal between Stokes and Hoffman as well, when they're discussing, what to do about the problem of Barnabas, and he, this isn't a disease. This is the living dead kind of thing that's going on there. That's an interesting scene to me too. Again, it's another dialogue scene. It's another close scene where things are being sort of expanded on that need to be expanded on, and but in a good way, in an artful way. It's working well. So I like those kind of scenes in this movie more than I do the attacks and and that sort of thing. Those are fine. I mean, it's a horror film after all. They're to be expected. But I like those other scenes better.
Yeah. Gordon, what's your favorite scene?
My favorite scene is the one with David in the old pool where he's bouncing the ball.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those where, it starts with him worrying everyone, and he's alone. He's still in denial, and it's just rife with both melancholy and menace.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel?
Yeah. That's another one of the scenes that was repeated in the 90s series as well.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'd say my favorite scene is actually the end. When Barnabas actually gets defeated, because in this version, this is like what you'd imagine a vampire being like, and I like how they weren't afraid to show blood in this version.
No, they weren't. My favorite scene always still is the funeral sequence. I love Jerry Lacey in this scene, and I really love how we're getting a reaction of everybody at Carolyn's funeral, especially because what really sets up that whole scene is the funeral scene when you see David Hennessy's face and it's raining. You could tell he's crying still. It's a jarring scene before they take her coffin to the mausoleum, and even when they take her coffin to the mausoleum and you hear Jerry Lacey's voice as you're going into that mausoleum is creepy as shit.
Yeah, I like the scene. I like the scene in the chase where he drives the gondola up through Venice and the pigeon does the double take. Right. That one's good too. I really like
Very
that.
reminiscent of the last movie we talked about, where he's leaping over the bridge and all that sort of thing.
And the pigeon does the same double take. That's right. Cubby Broccoli, love that moment.
Yeah. Because you guys call me Caligula, Julie only wants me to wear a toga thing now. Anyway,
you get to carry a dagger though.
yeah. I think I'm gonna wait.
And randomly ask for Invictus.
For men.
And that's right. And you have the right to have horses inside the house.
Horses
inside the house. Yeah. Especially a nice white one that you declare a god. So.
I hear you. Oh my God, you guys. Is there anything you guys want to add about House of Dark Shadows before we go?
There's one thing I actually wanted to say. I kind of wish Victoria Winters was in this, but I know why she wasn't, because she was not in the show anymore. When this was made.
Yeah.
And again, they made their choices in terms of what they were going to be able to expand on, at least reasonably well, in the 90 minutes that they had. So, which is one of the problems with the second movie, that he wanted to expand into 2 hours and some minutes, and they didn't want him to do that.
No, they did not. We touched upon that briefly in our last night's review.
Yeah, because the same individual was involved.
Yes, same individual. Yeah. Gordon, anything you want to add before we go?
Well, I think it's a pretty good kind of, like I said, a pretty good summary. Yeah. And kind of spin off of Dark Shadows. I'm kind of glad that Night of Dark Shadows was cut to 90 minutes, only because I hear an hour of it was Dan Curtis wearing a beret and reciting beat poetry.
Oh, wow.
About how much he was disappointed in Jonathan Frid for not being in the film, right?
Speaking of which, Jonathan Frid really has the last word in this film. That immortal line series of lines that he says at the end of the movie, which really resonate with me still. Clark! Clark!
Literal resonation. Let's go.
Well,
Turn the echo off.
I secretly think it would. I secretly think in the caning scene of Willie, it's not Jonathan Frid. It's actually Dan Curtis hitting poor John.
The whole subplot that's lost in that scene is that Willie liked it. So
Willie keeps screwing up. You know, it's like I don't know.
Oh,
Wonder Woman just happens to get captured and tied up again.
yeah, it's just amazing.
Here's a question for you guys before we go. What's something you would have wanted to see any of the Dark Shadows cast members star in? Pick any actor or actress to star in something.
A lot.
Mhm.
I mean, plenty. We've remade Star Wars with these people.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, we did. We
Sure.
talked about that on here.
I think get this cast to do a version of Murder on the Orient Express with Louis Edmonds as Poirot.
Yeah.
That would have been good. Now, I know this is I'm really fanboying out, but I really would have enjoyed seeing Jonathan Frid as Howard Beale.
Yeah.
It would have been a really interesting performance.
Yeah.
And it would have been worthy of him. Really anything before Jonathan got too burned out to give him a part that would have made him go, I was kind of done with movies, but Chayefsky, you got me.
Yeah, seriously.
I got to come out for this one.
Yeah, if anything would hold out like a carrot to Frid, it would be good dialogue. Good dialogue. And Chayefsky was definitely it. Just bring the whole cast into Cabot Cove and do Murder, She Wrote, and to hell with it, right? Who cares? Right. Half of the cast lived in L.A. by that time.
Yeah.
There was a character on Next Generation who repeated for a while. It was Kempek, who was the Chancellor of the Klingon Empire before Gowron, who gets killed. He's played by Charles Cooper. And he was great, just this wonderful old craggy Klingon who is nonetheless, reliable and decent. Frid would have been wonderful in that part.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it's those kind of parts are sort of Shakespearean in a lot of ways, and his classical training would have lent themselves to that. So,
he was the rich man's John Colicos.
Hey,
Oh,
I love John Colicos. I love him.
Here's my late 70s science fiction joke. It's just the setup for it. John Colicos and Anthony Zerbe walk into a bar. That's all I got.
Say what you...
I know. I think Janet Leigh did a good job, but I think the lady that played the first Victoria Winters would have played a good Marion Crane as well. Yeah, Marion Crane.
Yeah.
Yeah, good choice.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Gordon?
No, I just said, the cast who does Murder on the Orient Express with Louis Edmonds is...
It's a great choice.
I would have loved to have seen, well, first of all, Alexandra Isles as Catwoman would have been great.
Oh, keep your fetishes out of this.
Jules.
I think Betsy Griffin would have done a better job.
Yeah, keep the fetishes covered, right? I really would have loved to seen, because in the 80s, we were getting women of action. When you think also about action, I think about Cynthia Rockwell. I think Catherine Lee Scott would have been great in action movies. Would have been a great actress to sort of been that champion for women of action. Really, I do. I think they really missed the boat on her, big. But I know I could say that about any of the Dark Shadows actors.
I think she should have been a really good cast member on L.A. Law.
Yes.
Even an alternate Rosalind Shays, only she wouldn't go down the elevator shaft.
Yeah. No.
But what do you? How you guys feel about? Oh, good.
No. What were you gonna say?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. But how would you guys feel if Jonathan Fripp played Michael Myers?
Never
I know it
happened.
sounds unlikely, but imagine his mask get pulled off in that one scene. It's Jonathan Fripp instead of Tony Moran.
Why not?
Under a Canadian, there's another Canadian. It's like nesting dolls.
Well,
imagine Fred absolutely detested horror films of that kind. He
Oh, I
did.
did not.
Yeah, he did. He even detested House of Dark Shadows. He did not like it.
he thought it was Brigadoon. Yeah, he didn't like House.
Yeah, he liked the series. He liked what the series was offering and all of that. But he was that's why he didn't come back to the second movie.
Fred would have made a good Damien Karras.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That kind of film, yes, absolutely. It's an interesting character. Plus, it's more.
When I think of how like John Carpenter's Halloween for like Sam Loomis, I love Donald Pleasance. Louis Edmonds would have been great as Sam Loomis, like really great. I mean, because
David, and I wonder if he wasn't
David,
considered for it, except that he passed away that same year.
Yeah, he died that same year. He was a promoter in Rocky, thank God.
He was also in the Iger sanction with white contacts and blonde hair or white hair.
He was also a villain on the Wild Wild West.
That's right. He was.
But again, there's so many of the actors who could have did so many actors and actresses who could have did so many things. Before I go, I just want to thank you guys, Daniel, Gordon, Patrick, Alan, for joining me on this tonight. This was a lot of fun, guys. Links to Gordon Demowski's Amazon page, links to Patrick Cray's Dark Shadows They Look Abound, links to Alan Glenn's YouTube channel, links to Daniel Culver's YouTube channel as well in the description box. Gentlemen, have a fantastic rest of your night.
Thank you, Joel.
Good evening.
Arrivederci.
Take care.